It's a crazy time. During the last decade or so, a good number of people have had the advantage of being able to converse privately using a technology called end-to-end encryption. Before this, there was no possibility of a private electronic conversation. Government taps into all communications. Email gets routed into mass surveillance equipment in buildings like this. Phone calls are tracked and data has been collected on it for a long time via the NSA program called PRISM. Every phone carrier in the US participates in this. The newly implemented CALIA Law, Communications Assistant for Law Enforcement Act, allows direct real-time access by law enforcement to not only wiretapping, but the ability to see every SMS text ever made. Insiders and phone carriers track calls as well as read text messages by intercepting traffic using the carrier channel called SS7. Of course, there are also the various electronic surveillance methods like Stingray, which can intercept calls via radio. When E2E encryption came about, various messaging apps, like those I featured in my recent video, allowed us to have truly private conversations for the first time. Never before had we had this in the modern era. Finally, we felt a little free. But of course, governments did not like this change over the last decade, and politicians have made increasing demands to end end-to-end encryption, meaning they want to end privacy forever. But this time, just like they convinced the population in the US to give up their Fourth Amendment rights with the introduction of the Patriot Act, a new technology will be used. And this is being pushed in the US, the UK, the EU, Australia, meaning it is orchestrated by the Five Eyes countries. And they want to eliminate end-to-end encryption by pushing a hot button cause. And this cause is child sexual exploitation. But of course, this is just the cover. Almost like teamwork, all these governments are suddenly pushing the same thing. And if you're not paying attention, they will convince you that their moves are for your own good. If you don't understand the technologies being considered, then you better kiss private communications goodbye forever. Is this an important topic for you to understand? Stay right there so we can examine the issues very closely. This story really begins in 2010 or so. I was right in the middle of this time period because I myself was involved in creating encrypted messaging apps. Around this time, many apps bloomed with the goal of having encrypted communications. New apps like Signal, WhatsApp, and many others were beginning to be used. And by 2014 or so, apps like WhatsApp became ultra popular. While many encrypted apps existed, it was Signal that introduced the most popular protocol, which was using end-to-end encryption. What is unique about end-to-end encryption is that the messages are only readable by the sender and receivers of the message. No one in between can decrypt a conversation. Let me be clear that the three-letter agencies did not like this development at all. In 2015, a couple of shooters in the San Bernardino terrorist attack were killed by police but left their iPhones intact. The FBI then went to demand that Apple use their technology to break into the phone and retrieve whatever data was available on the phone. Apple refused, and this became such a big public issue. I remember people like Bill Gates demanding that Apple work with the FBI to break into the device. Apple did not help the FBI, though later on the FBI figured out a way to break into the device themselves. But this set up this new confrontational environment where tech companies were being forced to provide ways for government to break encryption in devices. Beyond even the act of breaking into iPhones, the actual goal of the FBI in the San Bernardino shooting case was to scan the content of the phone. For several years, the heads of the three-letter agencies in the US were quick to promote to the press that encryption of communications was a safety issue for the country and had to be resolved. And the government recommended putting back doors in apps. However, this is not such a simple issue as any of us in privacy are aware. Currently, we are surveilled in every possible way electronically, and all our data collected as revealed by Edward Snowden. But it isn't even about personal communications. Our entire internet e-commerce is now driven by encryption. If someone decides that encryption needs to be broken, this would impact not just personal communications, but basically the trust in all of e-commerce itself. It would not allow us to be safe doing any kind of online transaction, and e-commerce would collapse. Internet banking would not be safe. Financial transactions of any sort would be unsafe. Then maybe around 5 years ago from my memory, the same three-letter agency leaders started to promote a new concept. That concept is the idea that if we cannot break encryption, especially end-to-end encryption, then the solution is that tech companies must allow content scanning before encryption or after decryption. Well, lo and behold, Apple was the first to design an actual working system with this concept, and this technology was built into iOS 13. What Apple built was considered as a compromise because they took human beings away from the content scanning process and put AI instead as a substitute. Let me explain this in more detail. The main concept is that Apple wanted to concede to the government that it would allow scanning of device content. This is a very important point because the content on your phone is not encrypted while the phone is logged in. Encryption on a phone is only in effect when the phone is off. Entering your passcode turns on the decryption and makes your device accessible. This means that when your phone is active, there is no encryption whatsoever, and even messages and images sent to you over an app like Signal is very readable. Just open the Signal app and it is there. End-to-end encryption is only used on transport of the message. So if you can look at your own content on a phone, then someone that can see what's on the phone can obviously see what you can see. Apple then came up with a way to see what's on the phone by using the iPhone AI, which Apple calls the neural engine. This is the same technology used by YouTube. For example, YouTube is able to scan all the video content using its AI. YouTube gives the AI the characteristics that it wants to moderate, and then the AI goes off searching for these characteristics in videos. And then videos with these characteristics get flagged and will initiate demonetization, video removal, or at worst, account suspension. For example, the AI in the past scanned for any mention of the pandemic and then immediately removed those videos. Presence of such things as nudity, firearms, drugs, and so on will trigger these responses as well. No person needs to review the action of the AI unless a human review is requested. So this is where the AI is now at. The AI at YouTube can analyze every frame of the video, can transcribe every word said, and list the observations of content for moderation. Similarly, the iPhone can perform these tasks. New tasks assigned to the phone neural engine relate to computer vision, meaning the ability of the AI to examine the contents of photos and videos and determine the characteristics of the content. I've shown in other videos how this has gotten very sophisticated. AI can actually determine the amount of nudity in a photo, see the apparent age of individuals, understand the expressions of people, and of course, recognize any text in the image. It should be no mystery that this same technology can perform other analysis like facial recognition and object recognition. This technology is in every new iPhone since iPhone 10, and it is still there today. Well, it was Apple that opened the floodgates to what is possible in technology. A year ago, Apple announced that it was going to use this technology, which I will refer to as AI content scanning, to spot the presence of child exploitation photos in a device. The way this was described was that Apple would send some encrypted instruction to the phone, and the phone would interpret this instruction as a search for some specific content. The content they publicly announced they would search for was CSAM. Then if the content desired is found, the phone will send a message to Apple to identify that particular device. This was referred to in the press as CSAM client-side scanning, and this drew the ire of many in the privacy community, and this CSAM scanning was put on hold. Now, mind you, nothing has changed. The technology for content scanning is in the phones. They just decided that actively implementing a content scan and publicly reporting it is not good for Apple publicity. But unfortunately, politicians saw this as an opportunity. Why not demand that all phones be subject to content scanning pre-encryption? The benefit is for preventing child exploitation. While this sounds good politically and has many innocent supporters who don't really understand the broad implications of this technology means that our privacy using encryption of any sort will be over. Let me just list to you what politicians in various governments are demanding. In the EU, they call this the Online Child Abuse Law. The politicians are framing a legislation that will force any hosting service and provider of online services to proactively scan the content on their devices and platforms and report these to the government. Remember, if the content is encrypted, then the content scanning has to occur pre-encryption or post-decryption. Now, although the specific content supposed to be scanned relate to child exploitation, obviously technology cannot be built for a narrow purpose. If you want to build technology for content scanning, then it will clearly be able to scan anything. In this particular law, the responsibility for the scanning will be up to the service provider. Thus, we are back to big tech breaking their own encryption. The trigger to force big tech to implement this is what these companies will be passed the liability for discovery of such content. In the UK, a similar legislation is being proposed. This one is called the Online Safety Bill. This proposal was to empower the internet regulator, to be known as Ofcom, to require messaging platforms to be forced to implement accredited content scanning technologies, whatever that means. Obviously, some reference to the way Apple is doing it, maybe. In the US, Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat of Illinois, introduced the Stop CSAM Act. Now, if you read the intent of this particular legislation, it is actually different. It was more oriented towards victims seeing photos of themselves on the internet and forcing that to be removed. If victims are able to see unwanted photos of themselves, then it should be obvious that these are in publicly accessible sites and not a subject of end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption has to do with private and direct person-to-person messaging. But once again, the goal of this legislation is to pass the responsibility for the presence of any content that could be objectionable to the platform. And this specific legislation also passes the liability to the platform. Thus, it forces the platform to perform content scanning just to protect itself from liability. Additionally, because of end-to-end encryption, the platform will be forced to do client-side content scanning pre-encryption. Other countries like Australia have politicians declared that end-to-end encrypted messages must be subject to content scanning as well. Obviously, the principle of end-to-end encryption means it cannot be decrypted in the middle during transport. So once again, the forced solution is to create an infrastructure for scanning pre-encryption. Let me just explain where this is all leading to. In general, without forcing the use of a specific technology, the governments of these Five Eyes countries are demanding that mass surveillance technology be implemented at the device level. Whether or not the goal is to prevent child exploitation, the actual effect is to eliminate the possibility of any private communications, whether or not the purpose of the private communications is to help a child. It has nothing to do with that. You cannot implement this technology part way. It basically means cancel end-to-end encryption. If a tech company implements some content scanning technology at either end of the communication stream, then the end-to-end encryption serves no purpose. It's like putting some tech company as an over-the-shoulder lookout on every device. It is not possible to limit this activity to just CSAM material. Obviously, when the technology exists, the Patriot Act empowers three-letter agencies in the US to surveil anyone over this technology. Currently, no ability to do this existed before Apple built its AI content scanning architecture. Now it would be impossible for Apple to deny the government the use of this technology since they publicly said it exists. And though its public use for CSAM is on hold, there's nothing to prevent a three-letter agency from demanding its use. Just to be clear, new Google phones with the Tensor chip are also being enabled with AI just like the iPhones. So this same technology could easily be implemented on a Google Android. And if any of these laws pass, then Google, just like Apple, will be forced to create an open-ended access to scanning content. Ostensibly, this will be for CSAM material, but realistically, once that is created, there is nothing to stop an AI from identifying any kind of content on any phone. Apple has already implemented this same technology on macOS as well, so today every Apple device is capable of device AI content scanning. Apple has found a way to justify this as private, and that's by saying that the reviewer is the AI and not just an actual person, just like YouTube. Though identified content obviously has to be referred to a human for follow-up. Whether or not an actual person is involved doesn't change the fact that an automated system has now been built to pretty much uncover any kind of content on Apple devices. How about scanning which particular people have which particular firearms? How about scanning for private behaviors that are not against the law? More serious than anything else, the idea of any private communication will be a concept relegated to history. Folks, you must fight back against any government attempt to build a content scanning architecture in our devices. This is the exact equivalent of the Big Brother requiring a two-way TV screen in the book 1984. AI scanning your device is basically a window into your life at all times. Privacy will be lost forever. Do not support this kind of legislation. End-to-end encryption has been in mass use for only a decade. Let's not make this decade a historical footnote. Folks, my company creates products that are intended to protect our privacy. We provide phones that have no centralized control and are invisible to big tech. We have various de-Google phones in our store. These devices have no Google on them and have no Google ID, so they are invisible to Google. Check out our store for various models. We have a VPN service, Bytes VPN, which is a stealth VPN in that it doesn't scream that you're on a VPN. We do not put thousands of you on a single server. We have Braxmail, which eliminates the metadata from your emails. This means no IP addresses and traces on your email that show where it came from. And we give you 5 domains so you can partition your activities. All these products are on the store on my app, BraxMe. Come visit us there. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching and see you again soon.